we spend $20,000 per kid. The funding amount has increased 170% since 1970 in real terms, and the outcomes haven't gotten better. But we're looking at the wrong outcomes. They're doing more indoctrination. We're just not able to measure that stuff. We're just kind of seeing it unfold right before our very eyes. And families are pissed. Look, Vodi Bakum said it best. We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Roman.
Hello, Joyful Warriors. This is Tiffany Justice here with the Joyful Warrior podcast and Moms for Liberty. And I am so excited to be joined by a fellow Joyful Warrior today, someone who is as passionate about education as we are, as I am, as Tina is, and is making incredible progress in helping to free American kids from public schools, these failing schools where kids are trapped. So Corey DeAngelis, welcome to the Joyful Warrior podcast. We're going to talk today a little bit about your book, The Parent Revolution. For those of you that don't know Corey, though, I'm going to take a second and read his bio that he has at the back of the book, because I want you to know where Corey has come from. He's not just a fly-by-night guy who just decided he was going to get involved in school choice. He's really invested quite a bit of time in coming to this point in his life where he can be such an amazing leader in this space. So Corey is a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children and a visiting fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He has been labeled the school choice evangelist and called the most effective school choice advocate since Milton Friedman. That's quite an accomplishment. He is a regular on Fox News and frequently appears in the Wall Street Journal. DeAngelis is also the executive director at Educational Freedom Institute, a senior fellow at the Reason Foundation, an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute, and a board member at Liberty Justice Center. He holds a PhD in education policy from the University of Arkansas. Corey DeAngelis, welcome to the Joyful Warrior podcast.
Hey, Tiffany, thanks for having me.
So excited to talk to you today because you and I follow each other on Twitter. I think we see each other around the country. You were at our town hall in New York where parents are begging for choices for their children, right? There's a charter school cap, but 23 of the top 25 schools in New York City are charter schools. So, what's going on there, right? And so parents are crying out for education freedom. Parents have the fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their children, and that includes education. So, Corey, how did you become involved on the issue of school choice?
Yeah, I actually started as a researcher. I got my PhD in education policy at the University of Arkansas. So I'm a doctor, but I'm not a real doctor, Tiffany. I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor. But no, my first study at the University of Arkansas linked the Milwaukee voucher program that started in 1990 to long-term outcomes, including crime reduction. So this is one of the first studies linking a private school choice initiative to reductions in crime later on in life. That was a groundbreaking study that kind of thrust my name into the national spotlight. But even before that, I experienced school choice at the K through 12 level. I went to government schools all through K through 12 in San Antonio, Texas. But in high school, I had the opportunity to go to a magnet school, which is a form of school choice. It's still run by the district, but you're not residentially assigned to magnet school. So they don't have as much monopoly power. And that was a good opportunity for me. It was actually on the campus of my assigned government school. And I saw the night and day difference for 4 years right before my eyes. And I think other families should have education opportunities too, but it shouldn't be limited to schools that happen to be run by the government. You should be able to take your taxpayer dollars to another government school if you want, but you should also be able to take that funding to a private charter or home-based education option too. And so I also did my bachelor's and master's degrees in economics, and nowhere else is there more monopoly power than in the government school system, where you have to go to a place just based on where you live. Imagine if you were assigned to your nearest grocery store just based on your residence, and they were serving you poisoned food. You were getting food poisoning, throwing up every day, getting a rotten experience, or as we've seen in some socialist countries, if the government grocery stores had empty shelves. Imagine if you had to pick up and move houses to get to a better so-called public grocery store. That would make zero sense. They'd have no incentive to help you. In fact, all they would do is they would repeat the same thing we hear in education, is they would say, we just need more money. We'll fix it this time. It's the definition of insanity, expecting the same thing, and expecting different results, but by doing the same thing. So that's how I
So
really got into this.
So I think that's a great analogy, and no one would put up with it if every time you went to your grocery store, all the food was rotten, and they said, "Just give us more money, and then we'll have better pro." I mean, no one would go along with it. But with the schools, it seems that there are so many people telling us that this is the way that it has to be. So I want to just go back to your high school experience for a second, because we do this podcast. We have a lot of moms and dads listening, right? And they're very frustrated about what they're seeing in their public schools. The schools are failing. Only about a third of kids are reading on grade level in our public schools across the country. It's lower for minority students, with Hispanic students at 21% and Black students at 17% at average in fourth grade nationwide. This is staggering. I mean, $840 billion being spent on education in America. And to see this type of failure, you're right. In no other business would we invest more money and leave the same people in charge if these were the outcomes of your business. If you were a surgeon and only a third of the people you operated on made it off the operating table. And that's literally what we're talking about when we talk about education. This is the future of children that is being destroyed in our public schools. So what was it for you when you say you saw a huge difference, right, on this charter that was on the public school grounds of your zone school? What was the difference, Corey? What did it look like and feel like to you as a student?
Yeah, it was all about having high expectations, but also the classroom environment. I mean, I'd walk by the math classes in the math hall in the government-run school, because we did have one of our math classes from the magnet school that was actually in the government-run school. But a lot of these other classes, the kids were just disorderly. Like the teacher wasn't even teaching anything. And then more importantly were the social aspects of the school as well, where you had fights, gang activity, drugs. And I went to a middle school, which was my assigned government-run school. And I wrote about this in the book as well, The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from the Radicals Ruining Our Schools, is that we played a game called 10 seconds at the middle school, which was you fight for 10 seconds and then it's the end of the fight after that's done. And that was kind of the cool thing to do. In the bathrooms, you'd have boys beating up each other to get, quote unquote, rolled into the gang. And that was the cool thing to do. I was taught by a friend, a supposed friend, that I was walking too normally. I had to walk with a limp. And so he tried to teach me how to walk with a limp because that was the cool thing to do. And so a lot of people attack homeschooling by saying, oh, they're not going to get socialized properly. Have you seen the socialization in the government schools? It's negative socialization. It can look, and a lot of kids can fall through the cracks. I didn't, thankfully, and I got away from that mess. And I did have a good opportunity in high school. But homeschoolers can socialize in other ways, and they can capitalize on the positive forms of socialization while netting out the negative forms like I experienced in the government school system.
I'll tell you what, there was a photo or a meme that was put up during COVID, and it showed kids sitting in the circles. Remember the little kids when they would draw the circle on the floor, and then the kids had to sit in the individual circles? And it said, don't homeschool your kids, they said. It'll make them socially awkward, they said. What a freaking joke. Honestly, for American parents, I've told you before, Corey, I served on a school board. I had no idea what government schools were like before I served on that school board. Most Americans really don't, right? You send your kids off to school, you think they're doing well, they're getting A's on their report card, and you really don't think a lot about it. But man, when I saw behind the education curtain, and Tina did too, and then COVID happened, and all of America saw behind the education curtain, American moms and dads are waking up. And you have done such a great job of supporting school choice across the country. I think, how many states? Is it 10 states now in the past year?
We've got 12 now in the past 3 years. We've had more movement on school choice than in the preceding 3 decades. I mean, that is insane how much winning we're doing. Tiffany, we're winning so much, I'm almost getting tired of winning. Just kidding. We're not done yet. We got to get California and other blue states. But it's amazing. And I actually dedicated the book to Randy Weingarten and the teachers unions for overplaying their hand and awakening a sleeping giant, which happens to be parents. And Moms for Liberty has done a great job of helping parents band together and have confidence to push back and basically become a new interest group, one for the kids.
Yep. So let's debunk some myths here. Randy Weingarten likes to say that you are destroying public education. Apparently, any criticism of public education is destroying public education. That should tell you enough right there. So let's debunk that for a second. Yeah. Is parents having the choice to send their children to a school that's meeting their child's needs destroying public education?
Randy Weingarten and the unions are doing a great job destroying government schools themselves by staffing the schools with their union members, fighting against any form of accountability whatsoever, fighting against school choice, which provides bottom-up accountability and incentives to do a better job. They fight to protect the bad actors in the system. And guess what? They don't spend the money on teachers either. It goes towards administrative bloat and people like Randy Weingarten who make over $500,000 a year. They care more about the administrators. Since 2000, the number of teachers in the system and students increased by about 7%, but the number of administrators in the system increased by about 90%. It's become more of a jobs program for government bureaucrats than an education initiative for kids. But more directly to respond to her claim is that the public schools actually get better. You know this, Tiffany, you live in Florida, where they've had 11 studies on this topic. 10 of them find positive effects, more school choice, better outcomes in the public schools. It's a rising tide that lifts all boats. And public schools up their games in response to competition. Guess what? They always told us they had accountability in the form of this so-called fairy tale model of quote unquote democratic accountability. You saw how that worked out during the COVID era. We tried to push back at school board meetings. They cut off parents' mics, and they're still doing that. They labeled parents as domestic terrorists, invoking the Patriot Act of all things in their letter to Biden. An earlier draft of the NSBA letter even called for the military to be deployed to school board meetings to try to bully and silence parents into submission. That's not happening anymore. It backfired.
If that doesn't tell you what a threat accountability and transparency is to the public education system, I don't know what will. So you're right. They shut down microphones. They sicked the FBI on parents. I want to talk a little bit about what you were talking about, the fact that the administrative bloat that's happened versus the teachers in the classroom, because for a lot of people, they don't understand that. Well, why would the unions be supportive of the administration at schools growing rather than the teachers growing? And so I want to talk with you about a little bit about that. As the bureaucracy in the Federal Department of Education has grown and grown, so has the administrative bloat in districts in order to be able to respond to that bureaucracy, right? About on average, any district gets about 10%. It's really between 3 and 16%, but on average, about 10% of their funding from the federal government. So let's dive in a little bit. Corey, why is it that Randy Weingarten and the teachers union support this administrative bloat happening in districts?
They want more foot soldiers to fight for their political pet projects because they're more about politics and power than they are about learning and children and their families. So when you have more people in the system, you have a larger voting bloc. So that's one part of the issue, but it also means more dues paying members. If they were just to allocate that money to the classroom and put it towards teachers that are doing a good job, even if you had the same amount of funding in the system and it went to teacher salaries, well, they wouldn't have as much money for dues, more dues paying members, because if you hire more people, that means more revenues for the unions. And guess where the union revenues go? They go to Democrat campaign coffers. In Randy Weingarten's union in 2022, AFT, 99.97% of her campaign contributions went to Democrats. It's a money laundering scheme. It ought to be illegal. It's been going on for several decades. And that's the only reason why Democrat politicians oppose school choice. They want to keep the gravy train going, and they want to keep that money laundering operation going back to their campaign coffers. Democrat voters, they support school choice. Look at DeSantis's victory in 2018. The headline in the next day, he barely won by a fraction of a point, but his opponent, Andrew Gillum, came out against the scholarship program, serving over 100,000 kids, mostly low-income and non-white families. The headline was, "School choice moms tip the governor's race for DeSantis." And CNN exit polling found that Black moms in particular came out in force for DeSantis. They might have disagreed with him on everything else, but they knew they wanted their kid to get a better education than the opportunity that they had when they were younger. And so that became a single issue vote. Fast forward to 2022, DeSantis won by a whopping 20 points, and the GOP has super majorities in both chambers. That the Democrats are smart, and when it comes to the politician, they should start to listen to their constituents as opposed to these special interest control freaks that we call teachers unions.
No, I think you're absolutely right. So I also, agree with you about the political part of the unions and the administrative bloat. The goal of public education has changed. I don't think parents' expectations have changed. I think parents still want their kids to learn to read, to write, to do math, to be able to unfold their full potential in life, right? To have those building blocks and foundational skills in order to be successful citizens and adults who can have families of their own. But the goal of public education being a political operation, really, creating social justice warriors who will go out and be activists on a dime. The issue was never the issue. The issue is always the revolution, as we have seen, right, for Queers for Palestine on our college campuses. But I think that the administrative bloat helps the districts and the unions to do that, right? They are able to make the Student Services Department take on all of the different facets that the Biden administration and all of the different ways that they would like to achieve, as they call it, social justice. And they've been able to weave critical theory into every element of our kids' lives. I want to talk about politicians for a second, and then we're going to get to talk about school choice specifically. But Tricia Cotham in North Carolina was a Democrat who switched to Republican, gave the Republicans a supermajority. Corey, when she was voting to override Cooper's veto of the women's sports bill, on the Parents' Bill of Rights, on the stopping medical transition of minors, she sent us a picture. And that picture was from her desk on the floor of the House. And on her desk, she had our Stop Woke sticker on the side of her desk. And so then you have Marsha Maynor. Georgia, you've got politicians who are recognizing now that they have not been doing the will of their voters and their constituents. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think we're going to see a lot more politicians that are waking up on this issue of school choice, of parental rights, that are flipping and saying, I don't think the Democrat Party represents what my constituents want. Have you seen this happening in some other places across the country?
Absolutely. And I called this in my book in chapter 4, a phrase that I coined is bipartisanship through hyperpartisanship. That might seem counterintuitive at first, but the more that the GOP leans into parental rights as a political winner, like we saw with Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, Terry, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. McAuliffe got whooped on the issue of education by 6 points with those voters. That was the number 2 issue in the election. And so the more that happens, that the GOP picks up the football as the parents' party, the more it becomes a form of political suicide for Democrats to oppose it. So now you have sitting legislators in 2 states flipping to the GOP on the issue of education freedom, but you also have the elections going really well for school choice supporters all across the country. It's become a political winner. And then also in states like Pennsylvania, I'm heading there today. Josh Shapiro was up by double digits in the polls back in 2022 when he was attorney general running for office. He slipped into his education platform right before the election, private school choice in the form of lifeline scholarships. Doug Mastriano, the Republican, started calling him a hypocrite on the issue. He said, hey, you went to private school. You sent your kids to private school. I support school choice. Why don't you support school choice for other families? Josh Shapiro was smart politically in that he was able to take that argument away from Doug Mastriano on the hypocrisy. And then he went on Fox News reiterating his support for school choice the next year. He ultimately vetoed his own campaign promise. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it works out for him. But he ultimately caved to the unions who gave him over $700,000 in the election. But my point in calling this out is that you have a high-profile Democrat who is poised to win. He felt compelled to signal support, at least for private school choice, which is a huge change. It's a seismic shift in rhetoric, and the political winds are shifting towards our side. And so the more that you have this happen, and almost if more of the Democrats lock arms, like we've seen parents locking arms, and they could actually break away from the teachers unions once and for all. We saw this in Louisiana. They just passed, the 12th state, universal school choice. When their House initially passed the bill, 20% of the Democrats in the House voted for full-throated universal school choice. We've never seen anything like it. And so my hope is that the thing is that if one party is a first mover on an issue that's popular with the vast majority of voters, they're going to pick up some votes on the issue. They're going to profit politically on the issue. The other party will have an incentive to come along. And we're seeing that happen right before our very eyes. And again, it's the union's own fault. They're focusing more on the LGBTs than the ABCs.
That's right.
And it shouldn't surprise us that
stealing my
2/3 of
lines.
kids
I'm gonna
can't read.
start. I steal your fun students not system, so I'll let you have that one.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we spend $20,000 per kid. The funding amount has increased 170% since 1970 in real terms, and the outcomes haven't gotten better. But we're looking at the wrong outcomes. They're doing more indoctrination. We're just not able to measure that stuff. We're just kind of seeing it unfold right before our very eyes. And families are pissed. Look, Vodi Bakum said it best. We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the good news is, as you've illustrated with Moms for Liberty, parents aren't surprised anymore. They're fighting back and they're becoming a political juggernaut to be reckoned with.
So let's dive into school choice, because there may be some people that aren't really that aware of it. Honestly, we've had huge school choice expansion in some states and not a lot in others, right? There are parents whose kids are still trapped in failing schools. So let's talk about school choice. I know there are a lot of different terms people hear: vouchers, ESAs, you mentioned universal school choice. So let's kind of define some of this if we could. Give us like school choice 101 for a second.
Yes, school choice is any policy that allows the funding meant for educating your child to follow you to the school that is not assigned to them. So that could be public school choice, where you get to go to a different public school and the money follows you, meant for educating your child there. It could be a charter school, a school that you're not assigned to. The funding meant for you follows you to a charter school. It could be a voucher idea, where you basically get a ticket, a voucher, to use to pay for private school tuition and fees that would have followed you to the government-run school. The type of school choice that we've seen most recently blossoming in so many states, like in Arizona, they were the first state to pass universal education savings accounts. This is, I would say, the gold standard of school choice policy, where the funding that would have followed you to the government school, you can still take it there. If you like your public school, you can keep your public school, but for real this time, unlike with your doctor. But if not, you can take that funding in the form of an education savings account. The money goes into a parent-directed account. You could use it for private school tuition and fees like a voucher, but you could also use it for micro schools, what people were calling pandemic pods over the COVID era. You could use it for private tutoring, textbooks, homeschool curriculum. And so it's the purest form of the idea of the money following the child, an education savings account. You can now do that in Arizona. For example, Arizona government schools spend about $14,000 or $15,000 per kid per year. With the education savings account, the state portion of the funding, which happens to be about $7,000 or $8,000, about half of the total, that's the amount that follows the child to the savings account. And that can roll over from year to year. If you don't use the full $7,000, let's say your tuition is at a Catholic school, maybe it's a lower cost, and maybe it's only $5,000 or $6,000. If you have $1,000 or $2,000 left over, you can roll that over to the next year, which is important because a lot of the times high school tuition is higher than elementary school tuition. So to be able to save for later grades is a good feature of the Arizona program.
So a couple things on that. Universal school choice, meaning that every child has the ability, every family has the ability to make a choice for their child. Now, I really support universal school choice because this is a principal issue. If we believe that parents have the fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their children, their education, there's no stop on that. It doesn't matter how much money you do or don't have, your parental rights should not be affected by that. And so one of the things that I think for quite some time, especially in Florida, that we were hearing and seeing was that there was a lot of talk of school choice, but there wasn't as many schools as we needed. The marketplace wasn't responding in the way that I think parents were hoping that it would. It's seems that universal school choice, from my perspective, as I've seen it across the country, has really helped a lot of new schools to start blossoming and opening. So can you talk about
Yep.
universal school choice and what impact that's had?
Yeah, look, this is Milton Friedman's vision finally coming to fruition. I wish he were alive today to see that there's no more picking winners and losers. Every family, all kids, regardless of income, background, or zip code, they now have access to their family's taxpayer dollars to take to the school that works best for them. 12 states now with universal school choice. In Florida, the supply has started to meet the demand. Step Up for Students, for example, reported that even in the most rural counties, the number of private education providers has doubled over the
Oh, yeah.
last couple of decades as Florida has increased school choice. And when you think about the education savings account idea, supply is much more likely to respond when the money follows the child in the form of an ESA, because you don't have to build a new brick and mortar school. You can have a micro school, even if it's much lower cost to start up when you have these education savings account programs. So this was so popular in Arizona. Well, first of all, they broke their government website when they expanded school choice to everybody in 2022. The government website crashed because so many families flocked to the system to try to get their kids money to take it where they want. And now we have about 75, 80,000 families already signed up in Arizona. I believe in your home state of Florida, it's like 400,000 families now. But Florida's had school choice for a very long time, and they just went universal last year. Which, another thing I want to point out is that some Democrats voted for the bill in Florida. In the House, 11% of the House Democrats, yes, it was only 4 of them, because you have supermajority Republican control in Florida, voted for the bill, full-throated universal school choice. That's a huge win. It's a huge step towards bipartisanship. It's nowhere near where I'd like to be. But look, I think some of the Democrats are reading the tea leaves and saying this is the direction that we're going. We don't want an Andrew Gillum or a Terry McAuliffe moment to happen to us. But in Arizona, it's so popular, this ESA micro school idea, that the National Education Association, the largest labor union in the country, put out an opposition research sheet on Kelly Smith. He's the founder of Prenda Micro Schools. They were so popular, families are flocking to these options, that the NEA saw them as such a threat, they created an opposition political research sheet on him. It accidentally leaked to the Wall Street Journal, and the next day they ran a headline from the editorial board saying that this is the, quote, teachers union's tiny little enemy. It just goes to show you that the education marketplace is shaking up, and this is a way to economize on the process of homeschooling with the micro schools. And look, some private schools across the country historically have had to shut down. A lot of Catholic schools were under threat of shutting down. Now with school choice, even if you're not building new schools, you're saving schools that would have otherwise had to shut down, because look, they're having to compete with the quote unquote free good that costs a lot of money. I mean, public schools have a sticker price of $0, but they cost $20,000 a year. It's amazing that any private schools exist at all without school choice mechanisms. Imagine if the government were giving away free cars that cost, $300,000 to make, that didn't really work all that well. For any
Don't
private,
give them any ideas.
yeah, exactly. They want to go there next with the government grocery stores and everything. But for any private car dealers to exist in such a world would be amazing. So it's amazing that we have so many Catholic and other private schools today.
It's because parents love their children and will do whatever it is they need to do in order to help them to be successful in life. And so that brings us to criticism of school choice, because when we started Moms for Liberty, I've heard a lot of criticism of school choice on the left and on the right too. For Tina and for me at Moms for Liberty, I'm not going to be the one that stands at the burning schoolhouse door and tells parents, you have to keep your children trapped inside these schools. Randy, Becky, Pringle at NEA, if you're watching, we're on to you. You have done this to yourselves. Parents should not be forced to be complicit in the harm of their child, sending their children off to school every day, to a school where they know that 0% of the kids are proficient in reading, writing, or math. I can't think of a worse thing to do to a parent than to force them to be complicit in the harm of their child. Schools are becoming more and more dangerous, Corey. Teachers are leaving left and right. I know Becky and Randy would like to say it's concerned parents. Baloney. Parents are the number one driver of student success. If schools want children to be successful, they should be rolling out the red carpet for parents. But there has been criticism of school choice. I think the universal school choice and the options that are coming forward is helping with that to a certain degree. But can we talk about some of the concerns that people have? One of the things that I hear a lot is this phrase, with the shekels come the shackles. This idea of, the federal government and all of the things that the federal government wants to do. And Title IX is a perfect example of this, right? Of trying to redefine sex to include gender identity and sexual orientation, putting boys on girls' sports teams, in bathrooms, forcing children to lie about biological truth at school. Parents are concerned, and rightly so, to be fair, right? They don't want those types of bad policies that they're escaping to go to the school where they are trying to save their child, right? So can we talk about that concern and how valid it is and how we can help people to learn more about school choice in their area when it comes to issues?
You can get the shackles without the shekels. You might as well have the choice to accept the money or not. Look, Biden's doing this without a private school choice program. Look, in Oregon, they outlawed private education altogether in 1922. That wasn't a private school choice program. Thankfully, in 1925, in Pierce versus Society of Sisters, the Supreme Court famously ruled the child is not the mere creature of the state. And some people would be wise to remember those wise words today. I'm looking at you, Joe Biden, who says that there's no such thing as other people's kids. It's society's children. It's total communist gobbledygook.
All our children when they're in the classroom.
It's all
I
our.
think
It's
yeah,
insane.
yeah, no, thank you,
They think kids belong to the government, and that's their socialist worldview. But look, Tiffany, politics is all about organized interest, fighting for what they want. The unions do this all the time. With school choice, you get more of a broad coalition, a bigger tent to lock arms together against authoritarian government overreach in the future. You're more likely to win the battle if you have people on your side. And look, all of these programs are voluntary. They always have been for decades. If you don't want to accept the funding, you should not be forced to do so, and nobody is. But you should be able to make that cost-benefit decision for your own family. And the side benefit is that when you have more people on your side, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, right? We're always going to have to fight these battles, but we're more likely to win with school choice because we have more people on our side that way benefiting from private and home education. This is why DeSantis won in 2018, because he had school choice moms on his side fighting against the Democrat who wanted to take the people's freedoms away. But look, at the end of the day, we don't want to overthink it. We can't make perfect the enemy of the good. Do you want to be on Randy Weingarten's side, Becky Pringle's side, and Joe Biden's side? Or do you want to be on my side, Ted Cruz's side, who says on the back of the book, you can ruin Randy Weingarten's day by reading this book. Thank you for the endorsement, Ted Cruz. It was also endorsed by Donald Trump as well. If you're on Biden's side and Randy's side, you're probably not the education freedom fighter that you think you are. You might be overthinking things. And look, if you look at the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they have a website where it's all 50 states and the maps of how regulated homeschooling is. They found that in New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, a lot of these communist states, you have more homeschool regulation. That's not very surprising. Those states have zero private school choice programs. Think about states like Iowa and Oklahoma. They have some of the best homeschooling laws on the books, and they have full-throated universal school choice. These are separate issues. And in fact, in Ohio, this really illustrates the point more than anything else, is that in Ohio, the same year, last year, that they went on universal school choice, expanding it to everybody, they deregulated homeschooling the same session. So you can do both things at the same time. And I would argue, look, if the government wanted to regulate something, they could do it today, and they do in states like New York, and they do it in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. You should fight for the freedom to have some of that money to follow your child if you want. And at the same time, we should also fight for bills when school choice is passed to have stipulations that reduce the likelihood of government regulation at all, if at all possible. So we have in our model legislation, this was in the Arizona bill too, for example, where if you accept the funding, you're not a government actor. You can't be forced to teach critical race theory. You can't be forced to have a state test for the kids. So to make it as light touch as possible, all they have in Arizona, for example, is a random annual audit. They got to make sure the money's not being spent on drugs and other illegal activities. So they have an audit, which I think is a reasonable expectation for taxpayer funding. But they should absolutely not be telling families that they have to teach certain things like critical race theory. I've never seen that happen, by the way. We've had school choice expansions for decades that has never been included in a school choice initiative. So I think the fear mongering has not played out as anticipated, and we got to take the W, or else we're going to be stuck with the L. Because at the end of the day, Tiffany, the radical left almost doesn't even have to have their own kids anymore. They can use their infiltrated government-run school system to raise other people's children, 50 million kids a year, for 13 years of their lives, for 7 hours a day in government institutions, to tell them that big government is the solution to all their problems. Those kids are going to vote to regulate private and home education in the future if we don't do something about it now. So we got to take the incremental win, school choice, even if it's not utopia.
So let's end on that note. There are parents, when we were in New York, how many parents did we hear from that are so frustrated? Only 11% of Black students are reading on grade level in New York City. 11%. That is atrocious. It is an embarrassment.
And they're spending $40,000 a year. It's insane.
It is insane. So those parents are upset. They're frustrated. They came to the town hall. They spoke up about the concerns that they have. They want more charter schools to open. You have people like Ian Rowe in the Bronx with Vertex doing amazing work with kids in New York. Their kids are learning to read, write, and do math. They're going to have successful lives going forward. So for those parents that are in places that, as you said, these communist states, that are not supporting school choice, that are still in the clutches of the teachers union, some advice for them, Corey?
Yeah, don't lose hope. The parent revolution is a story of hope, how parents have banded together, gotten more success than we've seen in the preceding 3 decades. And so when parents band together, when they join Moms for Liberty chapters, when they become a political force to be reckoned with, that is the moment that politicians will start to get nervous, and they'll start to listen to you, because they'll understand that you're a more powerful union than any other, because you care about your kids more than anybody else, certainly more than bureaucrats sitting in offices hundreds of miles away. And guess what? You outnumber the government school employees too. Your families are more powerful than they had ever imagined. So you have more power than you think. And then also in the book, in the last chapter, I go over plenty of non-school choice related tweaks to the system to improve things. Simple stuff like don't keep secrets from parents. Propose these things. I mean, they're doing this in California. A kid changes their gender and they're trying to keep sexual secrets about kids from their parents. It's insane. It's government overreach, but you might as well try to propose these simple solutions, because it really shows how depraved the teachers unions actually are. And so if they don't pass simple things from the Democrat side on the issue like transparency, where's the money going? What's the curriculum? Don't keep secrets from parents. That really goes to show you where their loyalties lie. And that should cause them to lose votes in the future. Even if it's not a school choice reform, it's something that will help you hit them at the flanks and have more of a say in the public school system too. And then, hey, why not align the school board election and the bond elections with the general election? The same people calling Republicans a threat to democracy, calling Republicans people who engage in so-called voter suppression, they suppress the votes only when it comes to education issues. They don't want anybody showing up to education votes because they know their special interests will have an outsized influence on the outcomes of the low turnout elections. And so, hey, tell them that if you don't want to be a threat to democracy, we should increase voter turnout, align school boards and other education related issues with the general election. Just wait and see how hard they fight against that. The same people calling us threats to democracy.
Yep, I totally agree with you. Um, there are tweaks to the system that we can make in order to help students. But the truth of the matter is that, again, parents have the fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their children, and no child should be trapped in a failing school. I love Betsy DeVos's title of her book, No More Hostages, because it really did feel like our children are being held hostage, certainly during COVID. And I'm so thankful that so many American parents have woken up. Moms for Liberty, I am dedicated to working to dismantle the Department of Education at the federal level to ensure that parents, first and foremost, are the stewards of their children's education, that they're able to make the best choices, that we're empowering them to make the best choices for their children. And so we just thank you so much, Corey, for being on the front lines and traveling from state to state and working with legislators and testifying. I know that you have given so much of yourself and your time and energy to this cause. And when we write the books of history of this time in America, I think that you will be a part of that as a true warrior for parents and kids. And we will end on a very happy note because I'm a mom of 4, and being a parent is the most wonderful thing that I've ever done, next to marrying my husband, honestly. And it's such a wonderful joy in life. It's also a huge responsibility. And we're very excited that we're welcoming you to the ranks of parents. So on that note, tell us a little bit about the next few months for you, Corey, and your beautiful family.
Absolutely. Miranda and I have been married for about a year now, and we're already expecting our first child. Angelina's due August 4th. And so I am joining the parent revolution on the front lines with each and every one of you as a foot soldier, not just a general. So this is if you thought that I had a lot of energy for the cause, just wait until it gets even more personal for me, and it already has. I am a parent already of an unborn child, and I'm really excited for the next chapter of my life in this journey. I might not be able to travel as much, but this is the best part of my life, and I'm really excited to join the ranks.
Well, you've done a great job of raising up warriors all over the country that will continue to fight for education freedom. I know many of our moms count themselves as warriors working with you. So thank you for your commitment to America and to America's kids. And we wish you and Miranda and Angelina a beautiful August together. Thank you so much for joining us, Corey. Everyone, go out and get Corey's new book, The Parent Revolution. Be proud that you are a part of it, because we are changing the future of America. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you, Tiffany.